Welcome, everyone, to People on Dating. I'm your host, Will Morales. And for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, this podcast is about the ups and downs of dating and how to navigate through it. Today, my guest is Joy Levin. Joy emphasizes that Gen X retirees face unique challenges beyond finances, such as loss of structure and identity. Unlike younger generation who embraces flexible careers, Gen X struggles with ambiguity. Joy stresses the importance of maintaining relevance and building meaningful connections in retirement, stating the non-financial side of retirement is just as important as the financial planning. And that is so true. Joy, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. How are you?
I'm well, William. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
No, it's my pleasure. So, Joy, tell us a little bit about your journey, and thinking about Gen X and even baby boomers, because I'm a baby boomer. So, you know, eh, eh, what was that journey like? What did you see out there that we needed Joy Levin?
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, so I should start by saying I've been a solopreneur
Mhm.
for a little about 30 years. And so I had this business that I loved. I was a market research consultant. I still do it. But around, a few years ago, several years ago, some friends started talking to me that they were thinking of retiring and some clients. And I started thinking about my own life and my own kind of journey and retirement. And I just panicked. Like I felt like I can't imagine like I just couldn't imagine not working, not feeling productive and relevant and purposeful. So I kind of started a journey of my own where I poked around and looked at different things. What could I do? What would make sense? And I discovered retirement coaching. So I thought, wow, that is perfect. Like I can continue to do my market research stuff and build up a retirement coaching practice where I'm working with people who are trying to struggle with what I struggled with, which is how do I find meaning after work? Our identities are often very tied up in our work roles. And so people really struggle with that non-financial part, like you said, finding purpose and remaining relevant. Like, people would say, they don't want to feel like they say, I'm retired, and the conversation ends with people, right? People feel like, oh, well, then, you don't have anything to talk about. When in reality, they have a lot to talk about. So that's kind of how my journey came to do what I'm doing. And the social aspect of it is extremely, extremely important. Both, just in terms of friendships and what happens when people retire, their social ecosystem really begins to thin out, and we'll talk about that. And on the dating side too, there are things to think about and talk about. So that's kind of, my journey. And so I love talking about this stuff. And I am Gen X. And so I relate to them a lot. Like there's all kinds of things about their retirement that will be different. But I also work with, some late career boomers as well, because there is some carryover for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a great story. And it's funny because, like some of the people I hang out with, they're around my age, maybe a couple of years younger, or whatever, and they're retired. But one thing, Joy, that I'm lucky is that we have a community, and here in New York, so we roller skate in Central Park. So we have every even during the week, sometimes we meet up and just hang out. And but Saturday and Sunday, from let's say April through October, we have a season where every Saturday and Sunday, less events and things like that or weather, we hang out together. We skate, we have our own groups and things like that. So, and mind you, again, these people are in their late 50s, early 60s, and even as older as 75.
Good
But
for them.
but the community is still there, and so I
Hmm.
definitely get that part where I might not be in a relationship with a woman now, but you know what, Joy, my friends keep me sane, if that makes sense, because
Hmm.
I don't know what I would do if I didn't have them. And so we're in contact every day. We do group texts and everything like that. In your practice, in your journey, are we seeing maybe more Gen X and maybe baby boomers because people, end up unfortunately passing away and things like that? Are they not, uh, the childhood friends, are they no longer around? Or how does people lose touch with? maybe childhood friends or even friends they made during their 20s, 30s, and 40s. If that make
Exactly.
if my question made sense.
It totally makes sense. Yeah, because what happens is, first of all, we're a very mobile society. So there's a lot of movement. So a lot of people just lose touch with their childhood friends as they grow in through adulthood. So to stay in touch with some childhood friends is really very special. And it's becoming increasingly rare just because we're all moving around and we lose touch. So when you think about the relationships we made in adulthood, those also start to thin out. And it's more because of things like, somebody might retire and their friends are still working. And so they don't have as much in common to talk about. And sometimes people, were married and are no longer married, and so they lose that connection with friends. And so what happens is what I call like a network decay, where these friends move or reprioritize or kind of narrow their worlds. And the other thing, there's a lot that happens that I can go into, but nobody really replaces like the weak ties, right? Like we have these strong ties, really close friends, but when the weak ties drift, they tend not to be replaced. And those are often where the new relationships can form. And so a lot of people just don't have that opportunity to form these new ties that can grow into strong ties. So that's one of the dynamics. It's not that people, get worse at relationships or anything like that. It's just that the infrastructure that used to support relationships starts to disappear. So there's also a loss of like forced proximity, what I like to say, where, adults make friends often through work or through like their kids' activities or, community roles. And that creates this repeated exposure where people get to know each other well. And so when retirement happens, people start to remove that, it removes that passive relationship building, and so it needs to become more intentional and direct. And that is a struggle because a lot of people have fallen out of practice of making friends intentionally. It's, oh, you're my kid's parent, my kid's friend's parent, and so we'll become friends. And that kind of stops happening when your kids move away. And then there's, an identity disruption where people start thinking, who am I now? And so it affects how people show up socially. And so people end up either over indexing on their past identity or they feel diminished. So all of this happens because, that this is kind of the dynamic that's going on. So when I work with people, I'm not necessarily helping them become more social. I'm more helping them rebuild a life structure that produces that connection, if that makes
No,
sense.
no, definitely. So, Joy, because I'm thinking too, when we get older and all that, and some friends, as I remember a girlfriend of mine at the time told me there are people there for a reason, a season, and a lifetime.
Mhm.
Um, when you lose those friends, maybe it might be a petty argument or something. Is it, are people becoming just more shy to try to meet other people and going to social events or like-minded events? People are not maybe not showing up to those things to maybe form new friendships, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it can happen, sometimes especially when people, pull back from full-time work or, that starts to change.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, like I said, they kind of they have this network decay that tends to happen where they just, a lot of people have not really made friends intentionally since like college, right? When we were in college or high school, you kind of had the practice of meeting friends. You were taught as a little kid and you continue to do it. And as adults, we fall out of that practice. And so that's really a lot of what happens is people forget, kind of how to make friends or how to approach people without being awkward or whatever. So it's really just that it's rebuilding that kind of structure that will then produce connection again.
Yeah, I just, I hate to see that when, people lose connections, especially childhood friends. Because I was
Hmm.
thinking about this the other day, some of my childhood friends, and I'm talking about maybe I met them when I was a teenager and it's not much interaction. But I've been lucky that since I've been skating since 2004 in Central Park, I made tons of connections there. And even the last 10 years that I have connections, we still maintain the friendship. And again,
Exactly.
we all still connect with each other through text or, hey, are you going to the park tomorrow, whatever. So I've been lucky, like I said previously, that I have those friendships and I've been maintaining them. Now, the thing is, and you hit on it, when, if, and when I retire from work, um, I don't really have too many work friends because I just started this position like a year ago.
Mhm.
But again, my point is, I still have my friends that I skate with. So that's what's important for me, that I still have connection. And I just feel that sometimes people are just shying away, whether they're in their 20s, 30s, or my age. I'm just hearing stories that nobody's connecting anymore. Everybody's just home, either older guys watching sports or the younger guys just playing video games. I just feel
Well,
like that.
and
Yeah, go ahead, Joy. Sorry. Go ahead.
no,
No,
I was
please,
going to
please, please.
say, I think there is, a very, not new, very new, but something that has happened over the years.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at it right now, and it's the phones, right? That there's this whole reduction in this face to face, this human connection. You look at what happened during COVID, and just the phone, these cell phones can really help with friendships and relationships, but they also can become a major barrier. So what I like about what you're doing, which is so important, and I work with people on this kind of stuff, is to have these shared interests and shared activities. And I think what happens for people in general, not with you, you are able to maintain this connection. But for a lot of people, they're so busy with kids and work and all kinds of things that pulls them away from these shared interests. Then they just have to figure those out again. So fortunately, in your case, you've had that, you've maintained that over the years, but a lot of people struggle with that. And so, I kind of look at when people are starting to think about retirement and they're starting to try to rebuild things,
Mhm.
what I often advocate is doing like micro experiments. So we're not talking about like wholesale change in identity, but
Yeah.
it's making little moves. So for example, like I have this kind of three-layer model I'll sometimes talk about, where the first layer is exposure, right? So where are you showing up? So a lot of people just are not showing up in enough environments. They'll have like one or two, or they'll have something they're really passionate about, which can lead to long-term friendships like what you have.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people limit themselves, because they're on their phones, they're playing video, whatever it is, they're not showing up in enough places. So that's the first part. And then the second layer is repetition, right? So are you seeing the same people again, which in your case you are? And so people sometimes go to like these one-off events, and those don't really create relationships. You need to be showing up repeatedly as you've demonstrated over and over to maintain friendships. And then are you giving, the third part is a signal. So are you giving others something to respond to? So, for example, interests or priorities or invitations, all that stuff, because relationships don't really come from effort alone. They come from a repeated exposure with a clear signal. So, it's not enough to just say, oh, I'm just here because of whatever. You kind of want to open up a conversation and say, I was thinking I would come because of XYZ. Why did you? And, it just, people sometimes need help remembering to do that stuff.
It's funny, Joy. I remember one time, like this is way before COVID, so I'm talking about 2017, 2018, and a few times that I went to singles events, I didn't form friendships, but I was there talking to people, and then I saw people, especially on the men's side, three or four guys, they would be just sitting away from the group, and I'm saying to
Hmm.
myself, what's the point of you coming here if you're not here to mingle? Okay, maybe you might not meet someone attractive for you, but there's men here, there's sports on TV. I don't know. I just feel that sometimes, and I think you hit on the head, the phone, where you could just get used to just swiping, whether you're on dating apps or just on YouTube or whatever, you're just
Hmm.
consumed by it. Joy, I do the same thing. Sometimes I'm like, man, I gotta put the phone down because it tells you that you average 8 hours a day. I'm like, oh my god,
I
what?
know, it's
And
crazy.
it's spread
Yeah.
out, obviously, through the week, but it comes out to like 8 hours a day. I'm like, my
Mhm.
God, I could be doing something more productive. So I think well, I know you're right. I think the phone is just, it could be a disaster if you're not careful and not aware of what you're doing. Am I?
Exactly.
Yeah. So one thing, Joy, I wanted to talk more about was
Hmm.
when you do retire from work, um, and you built up friendships. Can friendships span decades? In other words, if you retire, let's say at 55, you're still young,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
maintaining friendships with maybe 20 and 30-year olds or whatever that you formed a bond with,
Hmm.
does it always have to be age appropriate? Does that make sense?
Absolutely not. Yeah,
Okay,
I'm a big believer in intergenerational things, because first of all, that's just the world, right?
right.
We're never, I don't believe we should ever stop learning. And we can learn from people younger and we can learn from people older. And so I don't believe that you have to confine it to your age group, right? I mean, I just think then you're really limiting yourself in what you're kind of learning from other people and being exposed to. So I don't think that is a true thing. I think it makes more sense that you're always connecting with people across generations, across age groups. And it's really then a matter of figuring out, okay, well, where can I place myself that I'm going to meet all these different people and creating these new opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree because I had some jobs where, someone might be 15, 20, 25 years younger, but, we just formed a bond. We always have things in common,
Mhm.
whether it's sports or maybe it's a certain type of music or movies. And I just don't want the people that are older to lose that if you do make connections with someone, because if I could do it, I think anybody could do it. But one thing, Joy, have you ran into maybe clients that are not as social, that maybe they're too shy, or they feel, what's the word I'm looking for, that they don't have that connection, or that, um yeah, maybe let's push shy, let's use that, that
Hmm.
they don't,
Yeah.
yeah. So can you talk more about that, because there's so many friendships out there that could definitely work, you know what I mean?
Yes, there are. And I think it's really a matter of, and this I think happens with people who are shy and also people who are outgoing. It's just a matter of, it's kind of like exercise, right? Like you build a muscle and then you're using that muscle and it becomes stronger over time and it repeats. It's the same thing with socializing, right? That, when you first make that step, a lot of people are shy because they've forgotten how, right? Or they just maybe are naturally introverted. Um, and so it's a matter, that's kind of this whole other area of how to get introverts to become more social. And I'm an introvert, really. I have good social skills, I think,
I
but I
would
get my
never believe
well, it's
that.
because I get my energy by being by myself. I do. That's how I recharge my battery.
Yeah,
And I know people like that, but it's really a matter of realizing, I think for people that introverts tend to feel like they're under a microscope and that everybody's picking apart and analyzing every single thing they do and what are they going to say that's not going to sound dumb or whatever. But really, people are just looking for connections. And so I always tell people, just try. And that's what I meant by micro experiments.
yeah.
Reach out to one person, right? Somebody, maybe go through your phone. Who haven't you spoken to in like years? There's probably, I would say 75% of the people in your phone are probably people you haven't talked to in a long time or made a connection at one point. So if you just do a micro experiment and reach out to one person and maybe have a coffee something, or maybe, just, hey, I'm thinking about you, maybe we could get out, whatever it is. But it's just kind of exercising that muscle again, where we used to do it when we were kids and we were coached to do it and we learned how to do it. A lot of people have just forgotten. And so it's making those small movements that tend to accumulate over time. And, they kind of compound over time, where you make one small movement and you maybe have some success and then you try something else and it repeats itself. And that's a way to start rebuilding a social ecosystem that you've lost.
Yeah, no, that's definitely important. Well, first of all, Joy, I could probably talk to you for another hour. That this is fascinating to me. But before I let you go, anything else you want to talk about? Anything else you want to promote? A TEDx talk that you got coming up, or an Oprah Winfrey appearance you got coming up that we haven't heard yet?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really, I mean, I'll just say a couple of other things that, I think in your 20s and 30s, this is for people out there who are in their 50s, 60s, wherever it is, in your 20s and 30s, your life generated relationships for you, but in your 50s and 60s, you have to generate the life that generates the relationships. So it just becomes a little like you have to think of it in a different way. And when you do that, you'll start to realize that, you can construct a life that will generate those relationships. So, I would leave that with your listeners as one thought. In terms of what's coming up, I mean, I give a lot of talks all the time. But for your listeners, I have a guide that I'd love to give them. It gives them, some ways to practice some of what we talked about. It's got some exercises in it. And so, I will give you the link to that.
Sounds
Have it
good.
in your show notes, I guess.
Yes.
And they can check that out and they can go to my website, which is genxencorelife.com. My practice is Gen X Exec Encore. So yeah, they can reach out to me anytime. I love to talk about this clearly. I mean, I'm very passionate about the whole aspect of retirement, but the social life is one of my favorite parts of it.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely put that on the show notes. And before I let you go, even though you said a good last word, do you have anything else to leave the show on a high note with keeping relationships later in life?
Yeah, I think, I think what I would say is, the people you meet in this next phase, in this retirement phase, it's not just about who's out there. They're a reflection of who you choose to live, of how you choose to live now, right? So when you change the structure, the relationships will follow. So it's not as if you can think, oh, I'm retired. This is always how it's going to be. It's not. It's really just choose the life you want to live, and that's how it will lead to new relationships for you.
Well, sounds good. Well, Joy, again, thank you so much for being on People on Dating and taking time out of your busy schedule to be on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, William, this was such a pleasure. I really enjoyed talking to you.
No, same here. Thank you so much. And we'll
All
we'll
right.
definitely keep in contact. All
Sounds good.
right. Bye bye.